I talked with a founder last week, and I'm not going to share who it is because I don't have their permission, but they are running a SaaS company. They're early stage. They're doing about $1 million in revenue. And he wanted to have a call because he's doing LinkedIn, and he's been doing LinkedIn for a couple months now. And what they're selling is a revenue intelligence platform. So selling into the sales team, right? ICP is kind of like the CRO and RevOps persona. They're kind of still trying to figure out whether it's mainly the CRO or mainly the RevOps person, right? The early stage. But those are the personas. The content that he's creating is doing really, really, really good. Like, I mean, I look at tons of content and founders, and this person is getting probably 100 to 200 likes per post, right? Really, really good content, really good engagement from relevant people, like from revenue people, sales people, etc. But he's not really getting leads from it. They're not really booking any demand from it. And so he wanted to kind of troubleshoot why the hell that's happening. And I was initially kind of dumbfounded too, because it was like, you're getting probably more engagement than me on average. And so what we diagnosed was what's happening was that the content that he was creating was relevant for their buyer, CRO, but it was not driving any demand for the product. And the reason was, let me give you an example of a post that he did that did really well. That was a CRO checklist, right? It was like a little graphic of like, here's everything you need to know as a CRO. It's like frameworks to use, how to onboard, like tech stack to use, the most important, I don't know, qualification frameworks to be aware of, like how long it should take you in your role to do this and that, right? And so that's useful to their buyer. The problem was that it in no way tied it all into the problem that they're solving with their particular solution, right? And so I shared with them one of the people that I think is probably the best at this framework that I'm going to share here today, and that's Gal Aga. I don't know if you guys seen him on LinkedIn, but he's been popping up, and CEO of Align, so very similar ICP selling to account executives, and he's getting obviously incredible engagement. But I know they're driving a lot of revenue and inbound and leads on the back end from this too. So it's not just fluff. And the framework is this. And so I'm going to break down essentially how this works, and then I'm going to give an example of a post that follows this framework, both from Gal and then from ourselves. And then we're going to reverse engineer this for a new person. So essentially, you start with a high-level problem or goal that your ICP has. Then you're going to provide a complete solution to that high-level problem or goal that your ICP has. And then the kicker, that's important. That's why it's direct response. Your solution needs to directly tie into this. The best case scenario is that your product or service is the best way of doing this whole thing more easily or quickly. The kind of one level down that's less ideal but still good is that your solution, product, or service is one step of that process. And then you can definitely include a link and a call to action, and you should, because it's direct response. And I've not seen the data of including a link in your post actually reducing your reach. I do this all the time with our live events. So I think including a link is totally fine. And then the CTA needs to map directly to the initial problem or goal that you had at the hook. So let's take an example here from Gal. He does this constantly, but I'll try to pick, okay, I think this is basically one. So let's look at the hook. The hook says, you're probably not ready for enterprise sales. I've led teams closing $1 million deals, but also seen CEOs fire half the teams after the enterprise push failed. While your board might be right about ACV trying to go up market can kill you, here are the 5 biggest lies companies tell themselves about enterprise sales and how to really grow ACV. That's a high-level priority that their specific buyer has, right? Essentially, how do we go up market the right way? How do we increase ACV? Right, their buyer is a VP sales, account executive. They have a hybrid motion, but for simplicity's sake, right? So that's a high-level priority that their buyer has. We don't know how to go up market. We don't know how to close $1 million deals, and we need to grow ACV, right? Then he provides in a sense, it's not a complete solution in the perfect sense, but he provides, here's the main misconceptions or mistakes that people made and how to solve them, right? Mistake number 1 and how to solve it. Mistake 2, how to solve it. Mistake 3, how to solve it, right? So it's like a really complete solution. Not a complete solution, but it's giving you a lot of free information that you as a VP sales can go ahead and implement tomorrow, right? He has a little summary section. One of the key points is to do this, you need to invest in a buyer enablement tool, for example, a deal room, and then call to action. We build a line to help manage the deal complexity of enterprise sales. Here's a free deal room used by 30,000 people. You can try it here, right? So direct response. He starts with a high-level goal priority problem that their ICPs have. He provides a complete solution that people can just take and leave. They don't have to do anything else. They learn something new that they can implement tomorrow, and it's valuable and insightful. And then he directly ties this into it. By the way, one of the key things that you need here is a deal room. And we do exactly that, which help you, go up market and manage the complexity of enterprise sales. Here's a link, go sign up. That's direct response, right? He went through all the stages. I'll give you guys another example. I need to let people in from ourselves, which is, this is the probably the best post that I've ever posted in terms of generating direct inbound for us, which is this. That's why it's pinned. This post got 70,000 impressions, 300 likes. It generated over 10 inbound demo requests from that organic post. Not ads, not afterwards, not me reaching out, like inbound, qualified, 10 demos, 1 organic post. And it's essentially, and I didn't know it at the time, I got lucky with this. Now I'm kind of reverse engineering this a little bit. The hook is, if I was CMO at a B2B SaaS doing 1 to 10 million ARR, tasked with replicating the Chris Walker, Adam Robinson playbook for my founder or CEO, here's how I would go about it, right? So we start with a high-level problem or goal that my ICP has, which is early stage SaaS founders and CMOs. One of their priorities that a lot of them had in mind is, I want to replicate the Adam Robinson playbook. Then I'm going to provide to them the complete solution. So it's a 5-step process that they can implement with details, with the exact tools that we use and all that. They can just take it and run with it, right? And then, and I was not smart enough to include a link back then. And then essentially the conclusion of this post, if you read it, is the hook resonates. So you read it, you read the solution, it solved your problem, but now you're like, holy shit, this is a lot of work. Plus this person clearly knows how to go about doing this. This is exactly what we do for companies and what we've implemented for people. So the natural conclusion of this post is, let me go reach out to this person who just solved the problem for me, and you clearly has the right expertise to just ask him to do it for me. Right. And so if I would have done a better job, I would have had a CTA here that says, if you want help implementing the Adam Robinson playbook for your founder, go reach out here, and then a link. And I think we probably would have booked more demos. Same framework, right? Now I'm going to give you an example of a similar thing, but a slight different. And that made all the difference of booking 0 demos for us. We go to posts. Let me go to my posts here. Let me go to last year. Let me filter by impressions. Should have pulled up this post earlier, but okay. Here's another of my better performing posts if we look at top level metrics, right? So this post, if we look at it, has basically the same metrics. We got 70,000 impressions. We got 300 likes. It's essentially the exact same as this post. But this post generated 0 inbound demos. And the reason is, we look at the hook, if I was an early stage SaaS founder, pre-revenue to 1 million ARR, trying to build awareness for what I'm building on a very tight budget, here's how I'd go about it. And then a complete solution, which is essentially like a podcast playbook. We don't do podcasts for people. So even though the hook clearly resonated and it was addressing a high-level priority or goal that my ICP has, which is early stage founders, how do I build awareness for what I'm building on a very tight budget? I provide a complete solution. That's why this post clearly got a lot of traction, because people found it valuable. But my solution did not fit into this, because we don't do podcasts for people. And so there was no natural conclusion after this post to say, well, let me reach out to this person and ask them if they can just do it for us. So I'm sure it was still helpful, right? It still generated trust with people. It still showcased that I kind of know the space. It still got me followers of relevant people. Like, it's not worthless, but it's not direct response, right? It did not turn someone from a cold prospect into someone who reaches out for our solution directly. So that's the framework. The reason why I mean this, it can 110 to 100x, the leads that you're getting for your LinkedIn post. The reason why it's so difficult to do is because a couple of things. One, obviously, you need a great website and a great product, because the maximum that this thing will do for you is drive traffic to your website for people interested in now exploring it. So if you have a shit website with shit messaging or a shit product, it's not going to help. You obviously need to have a clearly defined ICP, because if your ICP is like, it's sometimes a CEO and sometimes a VP of product, and sometimes it's an enterprise company, but sometimes also smaller companies. And, some of them are in SaaS, but others are in manufacturing. Like, it's not clear which priorities you should focus on. So you need a clearly defined ICP, which most B2B companies are not willing to do. Then you obviously need to deeply understand what high-level problems and goals and priorities they have, which a lot of people don't know, in their language, right? Not drive revenue, like, specifically. And then you might not have a complete solution for that, because that's the expertise part. That's where you actually need to know how to go about solving this. And then it needs to also fit into what you do. I'm going to give you guys an example of a less ideal case, one step out the process. If we go back to this post that I show you guys that drove no inbound for us about the podcast, if I was Lemlist or I was Descript, I think this is a really strong framework that I would be running for my founder, which is essentially, Lemlist is a LinkedIn automation tool, right? It allows you to connect with people and send messages automatically. There's a million of them out there. It's one of the core pieces of the problem. You needed to run this playbook. I listed it because that was the one that I was using at the time. I'm not affiliated with them, but I'm like, might as well just link up the exact one that I'm using. If I was Lemlist, this is one example of, starting with the high level priorities my ICP have, provide a complete solution. And then within that complete solution, my solution, my product, my service is one piece of the puzzle. It's not as strong as if saying, hey, my product does the exact thing, the complete thing front to end, it just makes it more quickly or easily, but it's still pretty powerful. Questions on this? Does this make sense? I thought it would be a good exercise, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong, to run through this, to kind of reverse engineer, start with a customer and see what this might look like for this customer if we had to come up with a post like that. Is that a decent idea? Okay, let's do this. So, example. And I'm taking a real company that I know, so I have some real, example here. So let's say the product that we're selling is a GraphQL platform. It's a SaaS solution. So roughly speaking, it helps companies move from a REST to GraphQL infrastructure, right? Technical, you don't need to know the details of this. I just feel like there's so many examples with MarTech companies out there selling to CMOs and CROs, and I feel like this totally works for any kind of niche thing. Let's say the ICP for us for this product that we sell into is the VP of engineering at large financial services companies. So like a bank, for example, right? And they need at least 100 plus engineers on staff for this to make sense, which usually means they're 10K plus employees, right? So you could say enterprise financial services. That's our ICP. That's our buyer. That's the person that we want to build trust and credibility with. We want to get their attention. Now, the next step is to think about what are this ICP's high-level problems, goals, priorities. So this is where, knowing your customer and talking to them and interviewing them obviously plays a role. I don't know them perfectly, but I have some sense. So I'm just going to list a couple. As a VP of engineering, you obviously want to hire great engineers, right? Or maybe even at some point, a great engineering team. So like a head of platform engineering, right? The person directly underneath you. You care about developer velocity. So you want to make sure that the 100 engineers that you have get more done with the time that they have, right? Increase developer productivity, right? That could be like, what tool stack could we use so that they get more done with the time that they have? I'm going to open the comments here. They probably also right now have pressure from the board to cut costs, right? As everyone, for them specifically, it's mostly infrastructure cost, right? Like AWS and Oracle and those builds, they need to cut that expense. Let's just stick to these. There's probably more, right? But let's say we map these out. Maybe we have not 3, we have 5 or 10. Okay, now we need to essentially think about for which of these high-level priorities, goals, problems, does our solution, our product specifically fit into, right? Does using a GraphQL platform somehow help with hiring great engineers? No, nothing to do with it, right? Does it help you increase developer velocity? Depends on the product, maybe, right? Maybe by simplifying your API footprint and having a very intuitive platform to manage that, a certain sub-team of your developers, the API team, they can be more effective, right? The 10 people of the 100 people who manage the API, they'll be a little bit more effective. Can it maybe cut costs? Again, you need to think about this for your specific solution. I know in this case, yes, it does, because for a large financial services company, they get tons and tons of API calls every day because they have a large B2C customer base, right? And so this is eating up a lot of their infrastructure costs. And by moving from a REST to a GraphQL infrastructure, you can simplify your infrastructure where you might be able to cut infrastructure costs by, even 10% for a large financial services company might be 10 million plus per year in savings, right? That's a large amount. Okay, cool. So we now figured out how our product can tie into a large high-level priority our customer has, right? Now the next step is to engineer the post, right? And obviously the first thing that we're going to do is write the hook, right? So the hook is now addressing exactly this high-level priority, right? So the hook might be something like, this is just a very simple framework. If I was a VP of engineering at a large financial services company, 100 plus engineers, tasked with reducing our infrastructure cost, here's what I'd do to, I don't know, chip off 10% of our AWS bill. I don't know, right? Now we're calling out specifically our ICP that we want to get attention to. We specifically address one of the high-level goals and priorities that they have, assuming that this is actually one of them. Again, this is where you need to actually know your customers and do your research. And then we're teasing that we're going to provide to them a solution. Now, the next step, the hard part, is we need to deliver on that in the post. So we need to actually provide a solution on how we're going to do this, right? The important part is there's probably all kinds of different ways how you could reduce your infrastructure costs, right? I mean, you could probably just go to AWS and negotiate with them. Maybe that's one approach, and you provide them with a whole script of who to reach out to at AWS and what leverage you have and what message you send them and what you tell them. And then at the end, through a 3-month negotiation, they're going to say, okay, you get 10% off. Because otherwise, right? That's one approach, but that's not going to tie into our solution, which is a GraphQL iteration platform, which helps companies move from a REST to a GraphQL infrastructure. So we already know that our solution needs to include this piece of it. Otherwise, it's not direct response, It might be just a good thought leadership piece that builds trust, but it's not going to be direct response, right? So there's different ways how this could play out. And again, it depends on your solution and your expertise, and does this actually work that way? But, you know, you could imagine a thing where, you know, the steps are, you know, do analysis of API stack. I don't know, right? And you talk to them what they need to look at, who the people are that they need to speak to, how they do this analysis, how long it should take. Then it's simplify REST infrastructure, right? And you have some steps on how you can simplify those things with very specific things. Maybe there's a tool that you know, or a person that they can speak to, right? At some point, it might be, you know, hire GraphQL, I don't know, director. I'm making shit up here, right? I know this partly, but that's where you knowing your customer and your platform really matters, right? But I'm just giving a theoretical example. Hire director of GraphQL, I don't know, and you give them exact range of salary that they should be looking out for, and then prepare, you know, infrastructure for GraphQL migration, right? And you give details on that. And then once implemented, move to a federated graph, right? Let's say that's the playbook. And the outcome of this playbook is that you actually save 10% of your infrastructure costs, right? It needs to actually be true and work. And now, right, we have our CTA, which is essentially, if you plan to do this, our GraphQL platform helps you do it, right? And it can either be that essentially what you do as a company is all of these things, right? Where you would usually come in from a consultative standpoint and you do this analysis, then you would help them simplify the REST infrastructure, and then you actually help them hire this person, and then you help them do this, and then you help them do this, right? That's again the ideal scenario of the first case, right? Where the whole process is your whole solution. Like there's no way around doing this without hiring you. A separate thing could be that these things are just things that they kind of need to prepare on their own. And your solution just does this last step, right? This is the other example that I gave here with Lemlist, where your solution is part of the complete solution, but it's one of the steps, not the complete thing, right? An agency that implements this would be a complete thing, a complete solution. Now, this is an example. Again, the reason why it's so hard to do, you need a good product with a good website that clearly articulates what it is that you do and what problem you solve. Then you actually need to have a clearly defined ICP. This is super tightly, narrowly, clearly defined, right? Most companies don't have that. Then you need to actually understand their priorities in their language and not make, you know, some guesses as I did here. Sure, the hook you can think of. Then you need to actually have the expertise to be able to deliver on this promise, to help them really cut costs by a lot, to really help them increase developer velocity by a lot, to really help them hire great engineers with, you know, new insights, not saying, hey, you should have an interview with them and you should ask them tough questions and you should, you know, do a technical interview and a culture fit interview, right? Like that's vanilla knowledge that everyone in the industry already agrees on. That's not going to help. Like you need to have unique insights here that a VP of engineering can read and be like, oh shit, I learned something new on how to address this that I didn't know before, right? And then this whole thing needs to tie into exactly what you do. So that the kind of natural conclusion of this to be like, well, I mean, at this point, it just makes sense to either let them do it for us or use their product, because this all makes sense and they clearly understand deeply about me, my problems, and how to solve it. So that's the framework. Questions? Terrence, you unmuted.
I'm thinking. I didn't want to say it. No, I'm just thinking because I'm looking.
I think this is actually essentially.
We've been trying to do it for clients too. Like, I love your format. I just did a screenshot if you're okay with that. Just
of course.
Example. We've been talking about this with clients, the exact same thing in terms of, you know, creating the post and then, but really delivering the. Do you see the result of this as a lead magnet that you'd sent in this, or you're just straight talking on the post first in terms of?
You mean whether this is a LinkedIn post or something else?
Well, I know I assume it's LinkedIn post, right?
Yeah.
but would you, is there enough value in that in itself to drive the lead, or would you have a lead magnet that's specific to this? So what I'm saying is that example you just walked through, I know, hang with me for a second,
Yeah.
right? That example you just walked through, to have a specific lead magnet that actually delivers not only, because part of this process here, you are actually in to be at a full complete post,
Yeah.
right? You're trying to prescribe the solution in it too. I'm
Yeah.
thinking maybe even tie a lead magnet that goes into more in depth into the deliver part, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
I think it's kind of fractal. You know, you could pull this out into all layers where I think B2B is still catching up to this, but the concept of a VSL, a video sales letter,
Yeah.
is essentially the idea of it's a direct response. It's a classic old school text sales letter in video format, right? Where you take someone from a cold prospect into an interested lead, and the way that you do it is the same way. You start with a high level priority or goal that this person has. That you provide them the complete solution. You walk them through a process or a framework, step by step, of how they can go about solving it. By doing that, you build a ton of credibility and trust that you are the right person to solve this for them. And then the call to action is essentially like, you can now go out and do this all yourself, but it's going to be a ton of work, a ton of trial and error. We've done this dozens of times for companies implementing exactly this process or framework. And you can just work directly with the experts who just told you the blueprint of how to go about solving this, right? And that can be your one, main video on the website. That can be your, right? And then you can, for the ads, you could pull out certain sub points, right? And create tiny video sales letter as a 3-minute video where you essentially address sub priorities of that main goal. And then the call to action there is not to book a call, but it's to click to watch the full thing. Right. So you can scale it all the way up and down, I think.
We just started, and we do a lot of the VSLs, and you're right. Now, all they're all B2B clients too, but they're working very effectively. And we're actually starting to do micro VSLs based on pain points and kind of starting to experiment with using those as lead magnets as well. So we kind of have an overarching VSL that talks about kind of all the pain points and walks them through.
Yeah.
But then we also have some mini VSLs or mini disguised VSLs that are going into more depth on specific pain points and trying to.
One of the people that I've seen do this really, really well, and unfortunately he's German, but his name is Sebastian Salinsky, and he is on YouTube. And essentially, they sell to e-commerce brands, large e-commerce brands who are doing over $1 million in revenue, and they help them. Essentially, it's a growth consultancy. So they help them grow through optimizing their ads, hiring people for them, et cetera, right? And he has a YouTube channel, and he essentially puts out a weekly YouTube video. And essentially, every YouTube video he puts out is a VSL. So what he does is he takes a problem that his customers have, founders of large e-commerce brands, and he creates a complete Google document. It's often 10, 20, 30 pages long, documenting exactly how he would go about solving that. And then at the end, it's kind of like, and by the way, you can now go ahead and do all of this yourself and implement these 30 pages of Google Doc that I just gave you, or we do this for companies, right? And they have like one main VSL on their website, for example, which is essentially the high level priority is the top tier priority, and this is where the kind of layers come in. So let me just write this down. Yeah, I'll just pull them up real quick. Again, it's all German, so I don't think you can. Sebastian Salinsky. I think this is this guy. Yeah. So it's all right. So for him, ICP is e-com founders doing 1 million plus revenue. Their product is essentially growth consultancy. And so the let me scroll up a bit. High level priority. The number one, and this is what their big video sales letter, let's say, on their website is based on, is how to go from 7 to 8 figures. right? That's like the main one. That's the number one thing they care about. And he has a VSL on the website where he essentially walks them through a complete thing of how he would scale an e-com company from 7 to 8 figure. And then there's subcategories. For example, how to scale Facebook ads or Meta, right? And then how to scale Google ads. And then there is how to hire a media team, right? Like all of these are sub priorities that feed into this higher level goal. And then you can imagine yourself, creating a YouTube video about the complete Meta ad scaling guide and the complete Google ad scaling guide and the complete guide to hiring a media team, right? And so, yeah, I think that's one of the ways to scale it up and down. Or you can obviously create mini versions, right? You could have a full resolution, let's say VSL of this high level priority, which is a 1 hour video. And then you could have a different levels of zooming in, addressing the same high level priority, but you just skip over a couple steps and you leave out a bunch of details and examples and all of that. So it's just lower resolution, but it's still addressing the one high level priority. I think another person who's really, really good at this is Russell Brunson from ClickFunnels. Any suggestions on how to define the real priorities for your ICP? I think there's no way around just talking to customers. That's how you find out. I mean, there's a couple of ways. One, you might have been your ICP previously, right? Where if you sell to VPs of engineering at a large financial services company, and before founding your company, you were a VP of engineering at a large financial services company, you know what these people care about because you lived it, right? Now, that might be outdated if it was 15 years ago, but if it was 2 or 3 years ago, you probably still have quite a good sense of what those priorities are. But even then, you still need to talk to prospects and customers and ask them these questions. I think there are some other ways, like you can do third-party research where you can go into communities where these people hang out and just read what they're asking, right? Like I did this recently for us, because obviously we sell to early stage SaaS founders. And so one of the people who a lot of people that our ICP follow is Harry Stebbings. Stebbings, founder of 20VC. He runs a large podcast interviewing tons of super successful SaaS founders, right? So he has these posts, and he recently did one. It's now been probably a month or two, so I won't find it anymore. But he essentially did a post saying, hey, I'm going to interview this super well-known SaaS founder. What questions do you want me to ask him? And so it was a treasure trove of SaaS founders commenting exactly what they want him to ask the super well-known and successful SaaS founders, which is essentially exposing what are their top priorities right now, right? And so I think there's other ways how you can gather this information, but I don't think there's a shortcut. You can also throw shit against the wall, and that can work if you're methodical about it, right? A lot of early stage companies do it who just don't know yet exactly who their ICP is and what exactly they want to solve for them. So you can make some educated guesses around, hey, I think the VP of engineering probably cares about reducing infrastructure costs. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that might be a good guess. And so you're going to create a post addressing it and then seeing if it resonates, right? And if it resonates and the post does really well and lots of VPs of engineering engage with it, then you know that you just found something. But if they don't, it's not obvious whether maybe your initial assumption was wrong, that they don't actually care about cutting infrastructure costs, or maybe just the solution that you provided was shit and not good and not unique. You just told them obvious stuff that everyone already knows. Might also be then the reason, right? So it's more difficult. I'm only now, like, I think, really pulling this out into specificity. Like, when I saw Gal Aga doing it, I was like, wait a second, this is a VSL just as a LinkedIn post. And so, yeah, I think it requires you to be really methodical, and I don't think it can be scaled to the point where just, you can post 5 of these every week, because how many high-level priorities are there, and how many different ways do you know of actually solving that, and then for how many of those does your product or service actually directly tie into? There might be only 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 of those things. But then again, I think the way to iterate around it is to change the hook, right? Like, this is the solution for our example here, which is essentially that's our process, right? The hook is how to replicate the Adam Robinson playbook. But that's not the only entry into needing the solution, right? Another entry point might be, hey, if you're stuck at 5 million ARR and you're trying to figure out how to 10 million ARR, here's what I would do to break out of that, right? That might be another hook. And then providing the same solution. Maybe another hook might be, if you're early stage, below $1 million in revenue, and you're selling into enterprise, and you need to create a ton of credibility and trust without having a lot of references. Here's one way how to kind of skip levels with building trust and then sharing this playbook, right? So that's what I'm thinking about now as I'm thinking about my own content. So we'll see.
Yeah, thank you. It always looks quite easy, but when you care about the details, the execution is sometimes feels a little bit heavier.
Yeah, and I think part of what enables Gal Aga to do this, when I look at his process, because I interviewed a ton of founders about their specific approach to creating LinkedIn content, most of them, and a lot of the really well-known ones that we know, they think of it the day off. They just kind of sit down and they're like, what do I find interesting right now? What's a conversation I had yesterday? What's like a random shower thought that I had? What's currently top of mind? And they go ahead and they create a piece of content around that, right? Dave Gerhardt, Pep Laja, like lots of people. And they're really successful with it. But what Gal does is he sits down once a week on Sundays and he blocks off 6 hours and he pre-writes all of his LinkedIn posts for the next week. And he often spends 2 to 3 hours per LinkedIn post, right? So I think removing yourself from that pressure of like, oh, I need to post something today and quickly. I have about half an hour. I need to think of something right now. Like, you're not going to have the bandwidth to like sit down and reverse engineer this and strategically think of, and plus, I mean, you need to actually come up with a solution, which might take you like real time and research and pulling stuff up and looking into stuff to come up with this complete solution. And so I think most people are just too busy in the day-to-day to take the time to really think this through front to end. And then obviously the risk is you spend 3 hours on it and then it flops, which feels shitty, right? So like even me, like who kind of understands this and know that this is important, like it's hard for me to just say, I'm just going to spend 3 hours writing this post, putting it out there, because I'm still like, man, there's so many things I can just spend 20 minutes writing real quick, get that out, and I know it's going to do decently. So I do think there's some mode element to that, like, cool guys. All right, if there's no question, that we're going to just wrap up here. And next week, unless I book a guest, it's probably going to be solo again. And then the week after that, the February the 13th, I have someone booked. I'm pretty excited to interview. So thank you guys for joining.